Hi friends, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to discuss about singleton design pattern in iOS. So this is one of the design pattern which almost every one of us have used in code sometimes. But many times the question comes in interview like is singleton is too bad to use, or if it is good then in which scenario we have to use. If it is too bad then why we are using it, or why in fact Apple is also using singleton in many instances. So we'll discuss about all these scenarios in this video. So please watch this video till end, and if you have not subscribed the channel then please do subscribe. Okay, now let's come to the question, what is singleton? The first thing. So if I go with the Apple's documentation, what does singleton do? Provide access to shared resource using a single shared class instance. So what does basically singleton says that you can create only one instance of a particular class. So how can I declare a singleton? So let's say that I create a class, I call it logger, and then here I create a static where shared equals to logger, and then I'm creating the object of this, like let logger equals to logger dot shared. Okay, so this is like I'm accessing it through the a single shared instance. But the question is that is it really a singleton? The answer is no, because I can always write it like let logger 1 equals to logger. So I'm not preventing my logger class to be initiated from outside of the class. So this, the first thing, that when you are creating a singleton, you always have to override the init method to make sure that in no cases anybody should be able to create object outside the class. So now this is what we can tell that this syntax makes your singleton class. Okay, so how can we create singleton class? This is the answer. You have to create a class, make a static variable, and then override the init method and make it private. Okay, now the question comes like, is singleton thread safe? Okay, now let's see. I'm telling that singleton is not thread safe. Now how can we like check that whether singleton is thread safe or not? We'll see through a simple example. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a for loop. Let's say for I in 1 to, let's say 200, and logger class, so logger dot shared, and here let's write some method. Let's say that what I'm going to do here, I'm going to write a function which will log all the log which I'm going to use throughout my application. Okay, so I'll just create function write to log. Okay, and then it will have two things. Let's say a key which will be of a string type, and then the value, it can be anything. Okay, now where it's going to log, so I'll just create here a dictionary, private log dict, and I will make it of type string colon any, and then log dict key equals to value. Okay, and let's call this function from here write to log, and I'll pass the key as my I, just call it as key, and then the value will be value I. Okay, it is giving some, okay, I missed a word where. So now my logger is ready. Okay, now if I run this function, now what happens? So it should log perfectly 200 times. Okay, now to further check whether it is logging properly or not, what I'm going to do, I'm just print the same thing here. So print key is key and value is value. So let's run it again. So this should successfully log me 200 times my log. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with my singleton. I'm just using, so in this real-time project I can use this logger from multiple class, and it's very easy to use. Like, Now instead of directly using this for loop, I'm going to create a queue object. So let's say queue equals to dispatch queue, and then label, I'll give it as singleton demo, and then let's make it as concurrent. Okay, now instead of directly using inside the for loop, I will use using a asynchronous function. So queue dot async, and then use a logger here. So like in your scenario, you will have multiple type when you know work with actual project. It's not like that you will be using your logger always from normal function. You will be using multi-threading, and you might require to log your function from some sort of queue, correct? So let's say in that scenario, if I try to log, what happens to my logger? And if you see in this particular example, it's got crash. So that shows that this singleton is not thread safe, and the reason is that because we are using a dictionary and this is not thread safe. This is not thread safe, and we are using it from the concurrent thread, and that's the reason that it's crashing here. Now the question comes that is singleton thread safe? The answer is no. If you create like this, it is not thread safe at all. Now the question comes that how to make our singleton thread safe. Now what can we do so that our singleton becomes thread safe? Okay, so one thing, like there can be multiple approaches, like using serial queue, using concurrent. Let's first taking the example of a serial queue. So what I will do, I'll define a serial queue here also, and then dispatch queue, I'll pass label as, let's say, logger queue. Okay, and then I will log this inside a serial queue like this. Now if I run it, this time it is not crashing, it is logging everything properly. But if you see here, this time I have used a synchronous thread, and you all know that synchronous is some kind of a blocking thread. Okay, so this works, but it might give you a scenario where you might end up with some race condition. Let's say that you are writing also, and the same time you are reading also. Okay, so in this case, when you use sync, it will first try to complete the synchronous operation, and then only it will allow you to read it, correct? So it will work, it will make it thread safe, but yeah, again it is leading you to make a different issue, that is the race condition. Okay, now what can we do so that we can avoid that particular race condition also? Okay, so now in that case, instead of making this synchronous, I prefer making it as asynchronous. So let's make this queue as concurrent queue, so that in the future if I have to read the log also, this should not be any problem. Okay, so what I'm going to use here, I'm going to use another attributes, and let's call this as concurrent. Okay, now in the concept of concurrent, here what I'm going to use async. But if I run this right now, it's giving you some reference error. So let's say that if I give here self, and then also I write it, and let's see that if it works or it still crashes. So I missed in. So in this case also it is crashing. Okay, so now to solve this, we can use a concept of called barrier. Now what is barrier? So basically a barrier is used on a concurrent queue in order to synchronize the write operation. Okay, right now this is not synchronized, we are writing something, and this is not synchronized. Okay, so by indicating the barrier flag, what actually it does, it allows to make access to a typical resource or a certain resource to a thread safe. Okay, so hence what happens, that synchronizing write access will keep the benefit of concurrent reading also, that in the future when I have, let's say, one more function, something like read log, so it will allow us to simultaneously write and read both the thing. Okay, so you using the barrier is very simple. What we have to do, we have flags. Okay, so here flags, I'll give it as dot barrier. Okay, now if I run this again, and now if you see, it's working fine. Okay, and even now if I write a function of reading the log, it will not crash. So now this has become completely thread safe. Okay, so like if I go more in details of barriers, so what does this barrier basically do? So the barrier switches between concurrent and serial queue and performs as a serial queue until the code in barrier block finishes its execution, and again switches back to concurrent queue after executing the barrier block. This way, how you can make your singleton a thread safe. Okay, like it can be accessed from multiple thread. So this answers your question that how to make singleton thread safe. Now comes the important question which is generally asked: is singleton bad? So the answer is like, it's not like that singleton is bad, because if singleton is bad, then Apple's must not be using it. If you see, like there are multiple places where Apple is using singleton. You take your user defaults, you take your URL session, file manager. There are lot of scenario where Apple is using the singleton. So the singleton is not bad. Then why we are not using it, or why this question is asked that why singleton is a bad architecture? The problem is that it's being misused and overused by us, and the reason is very simple. Let's say that if you have to share data across your application, it's very easy to create a singleton class, and then we know that it's like a single instance, so I can easily access the data throughout my application without doing any sort of hard work. But the same thing, if let's say that if I'm not using singleton, maybe I have to use some sort of dependency injection, some sort of repository. There are other approaches, but with singleton it becomes very easier to share your functionality, to share your data across the application. But what the problem comes, the biggest problem if you use singleton lot many in your code is that when you try to write the test cases, it will create a lot of problems. Other problem is it breaks the solid principle, because now you are not, you're creating a singleton, and then let's say that in the same function I'm writing the log, I'm reading the log. Maybe if I have to make, let's say that upload a API call, I will put everything into the same singleton class. So you are, let's say that what if I have to write different type of log for different functionality? In that case, what you will do, you will again write a if else condition, do more no conditions, and then achieve your functionality. Your code is always not in a good shape. Anybody is modifying, writing, and then you are breaking all the open close principle, you are breaking the scope substitution, everything you are breaking it here. So singleton is not bad, but yes, if you ask me that, Nilesh, are you going to use singleton? My first answer will be no. I'll prefer not using singleton until unless there are like this is one of the scenario where I have to log something, or I have to create something like analytics manager. In those cases, I will prefer using singleton. But for other scenarios, like if I have to write a network layer, I'll prefer not using singleton in any of such scenario. So singleton is not bad, but yeah, we should not misuse it. So that's the thing. So almost if you see nowadays in the bigger company, they are moving away from the singleton. Like if you ask for an experienced developer, they don't prefer writing or using a singleton class. So if somebody asks you, you can just rightly tell that I prefer not using it, and you can just give few example where you are using it, but try not to use it. And then which scenario we can consider for singleton? Yeah, if you ask me, I gave you two example. If I have to create a logger class, or I have to create an analytics manager class, I'll prefer using singleton in those scenario. But yeah, for sharing data across the app, or for sharing some common functionality across the app, I'll never use singleton, because I never want to burden my memory in that particular case. So that's all for today's video. Hope you like this video on the singleton, and no, after watching this video you will use singleton. It's not like that you will never use it, but yeah, you will use where it is required, and don't misuse it. Again, thanks for watching the video, and if you really like the video, please do subscribe the channel. Thank you.